Right, so today on Conversations with Kate, we have Chris Bogue, who I met on Julian Mather's show, and he was so interesting talking about his film, transferring his film, 16mm film, to digitalizing it, and all the exciting stuff he learnt about his parents and his grandparents and probably previous generation, I don't know. So, hey, Chris, how are you?
Hey, Kate, I'm fantastic. Thanks
Oh,
for having me on the show.
you are so welcome. You were so interesting. I loved what you were talking about because it was so much of what I was doing, my brother was doing with our film as well. So, you tell me about your family first. What generations do you have that you know of?
Oh, geez. I'm not, so it's like my great grandparents I guess that was the first generation that was here. Most of my family came from Poland. We've got a lot of Polish people in my family. We're all from the south side of Chicago.
Yeah.
Which is like, I was born and raised here. And yeah, so were my grandparents, and they're big families. They were Midwestern farmers. My great grandparents, who, lived through the Great Depression. And yeah, they had big families. Then it was like, they had their kids. My mom and dad grew up in the south suburbs too. But I never knew most of my family. My grandfather on my mother's side died when I was about 5. My grandmother on my mother's side died when I was 12. And I never met my great grandparents.
Wow.
But I've recently begun this project of archiving and digitizing all my family footage. And yeah, I am now often for the first time in my life getting to see all these people from my ancestry that I just had no idea what they looked like.
Yeah. Yeah. What? How did you come across it and why? Why did you start that?
So it's like for my business, I coach people to get on video. And I started just mostly doing sales training.
Mm-hmm.
COVID happened, and I was doing a type of sale that was really disrupted. It was like I was selling to universities at the time. And so it was like the 3 best ways to reach professors were cold call their office, visit them at an educational conference, or visit them on campus. COVID happened. All 3 of those options were off the table. So I started getting on video, and I noticed it was very effective because it allows you to create this human connection with people, right?
Mm.
All your storytelling gifts that you would use in an in-person presentation, your tone of voice, your eye contact, your empathy, you now have those available to you. And I was like, this is really powerful. So I started teaching the sales training, and then I needed to market myself to get more clients. So I started creating video content. I got really into it. I make really I was a sketch comedian for a long time too, so I make a lot of sketch comedy. I do a lot of stuff where it's multiple camera angles and sound effects and music and stock footage. And at some point, I had to upgrade my computer. I have a lot more storage. I have a lot more powerful computing powers. I've got a lot of like complicated projects where I'm using lots of different types of footage and stuff. And we were sitting around at my parents' house one day, and they were like, "Oh, someday we should just digitize all these home movies that we have." And I stopped and I realized I'm like, well, I could actually do that now. Like I actually have a powerful enough computer to do that and enough storage. Yeah, I could just do it. So I started with the old VHS tapes from my parents that my brothers and I had when we were growing up.
Mhm.
And yeah, that was cool. That took a while. And then around Christmas time, yeah, I was at my parents' house and I found this old container underneath the stairs, and it had about 68mm reels in it.
Oh, wow.
And they were all developed at Walgreens, and they literally have a sticker on them saying the exact date and time that they were developed,
Oh,
you know?
that's
So
awesome.
yeah, so some of these, reels are 64 years old. Uh and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna digitize all of them. I bought a
Mm.
machine that scans them frame by frame, you know,
Yeah.
and an 8mm reel only contains about 3.5 minutes worth of footage.
Mm.
And I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna do them. So I did, and now they're there. They're all there in digital form. And my hope is that 64 years after I'm dead, someone might still watch them,
Mm.
and like I don't have children myself, but I've got nieces now. My nieces are very young. And it's interesting because now they can see their great great grandparents.
Yeah.
They can see their great grandparents they never met. My mother, their grandmother, who's their babysitter, they can watch her learning to crawl, and they can watch her first steps, and they could see what she was like when she was a baby, and it's just fascinating to me because this footage wasn't getting in better shape. The longer you leave it, the more deteriorated it becomes. And yeah, I know so many people that have this box of footage sitting around and it's just collecting dust.
Mm. So have you watched all those? All the
Not
videos?
all,
All
not
the,
all of them.
yeah.
So,
Not all.
especially the VHS ones, there's just too much footage for me to watch.
Yeah.
Some of these are like 6 hours long. And I just don't have the time. So it's like basically like I've left a note here for future generations where I told them there's a lot of mysteries in this footage, right? Even the
Yeah.
VHS tapes from the 80s and 90s, I tried as best as I could to put the timeline together and to successfully put the date on every single clip, but a
Mm.
lot of it's wrong. A lot of
Mm.
it's wrong. And I'm like, a lot of this, if you went to Revis High School and looked up like what the exact date of this play was, you could find it. I don't have the time to go do that, but for
Mm.
future generations, if you want to make this data more complete, you can. But yeah, there's weird moments. There's a moment from it was like 1989. I was 2 years old. The camera was brand new. My dad had this big camera that you got to put on your shoulder, and he was filming Christmas at my uncle's place.
Yeah.
And there's this moment where he just forgot the camera on the tripod. He forgot that it was turned on. So it's just 20 minutes of just like picking up sound. Like nobody's in the camera shot, but you
Yeah.
can hear everybody talking. And then at the 20-minute mark, someone's like, Joe, did you leave the camera on? He's like, and then it ends.
Yeah.
Um, but it's like, yeah, you can just eavesdrop on like what were people talking about that
Yeah.
Christmas in 1989,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's wild.
Yeah. And then seeing your grandparents as well. Have you watched that video?
Yeah. I have watched the stuff of my grandparents. It's weird because they look like movie stars. It's
Mm.
like everybody at the time was like super fit and they were all young. All the men served in the war,
Yeah.
so they've all got these chiseled jawlines. And
Yeah.
the other thing too is like I feel like we have this very stressful world we're living in,
Mm.
and it clouds our memories. So I remember showing my mom the footage from when we were little kids, and she was the age that I am now.
Mm.
And she was just like, look how happy I was, like there was this blissful happiness because her and my father were so young. They
Yeah.
didn't know half the stuff that they were supposed to worry about. But, now that they're older, they worry about everything. And it's so weird to just see them young and happy and, trying their best with their kids. And, um, there's a lot of footage that's just like school plays and stuff that I'm not going to watch. But
Yeah.
the Christmases, the birthdays, the surprise parties, that's where the real magic is at, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. Or even like after a school play, it was never the school play or the graduation. It was the picture taking afterwards that's interesting.
Yeah.
Where you get to see all the relatives who showed up and they're posing together. And that's what I really love, and that's what my family has loved. And these little moments, again, there's a reason why everybody takes out the camera at birthdays and holidays and anniversaries and weddings. And
Mm.
um yeah, my whole thing is like, you don't need to be a video star. You just need to be good for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And yeah, for, retirements, for funerals, for things like that, having just a little bit of footage from the past is a really magical thing, I think, that really takes people back.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know why I'm so obsessed with it, Kate, but I am.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's really, I think it's really good because I love, carrying down the generation stories from previous generations. Like if my children know all my stories, they know all my dad's stories, my mum's stories. So that, and my nana and granddad and, grandma and grandfather. And it's like all the stories are carried down in our family because I'm from an Irish background. So it's all about stories and sharing
Yes.
your life. And, I remember my now they're going down to my grandchildren, and they're getting the stories, like they're all getting their licenses now, and they're getting the stories of when our children, like their mums, got their licenses as well. And I just think it's important to carry down the generational stuff, to know where you've come from as well. And it seems like you're getting that with seeing all these videos, like seeing your grandma and grandpa and, mum growing up, and you and your brothers growing up as well. So the story
Yeah.
is already there.
Yeah. It's also interesting to see, think about who is behind the camera.
Yeah.
So like in my case, it's like reviewing the footage from my childhood. Started with my dad with the big honking one. Only my dad was big enough to pick it up. He had it on a tripod most of the time. So there's a lot of stuff where it was really stationary. Then like somewhere around when I was like 10 years old, he got like a handheld cam.
Yeah.
So it's like there's always this period of time right when they get the new camera where they're just using it on everything.
That's right.
And filming stuff. Then there was a gap where, my grandmother got very sick and she died, and it was very difficult for my family. So there's this gap in footage where
Oh,
there's just a while where they just didn't feel like having the camera on, didn't feel like documenting what was going on because there was a lot of pain that was happening.
yeah.
And then something else happened, which is my brothers and I became old enough to operate the camera. So
Wow.
now there's all this footage of us being idiots,
Yes.
because we're running around making, movie parodies. We're like doing nonsense in the backyard. We're, doing like crazy stunts and all that. And yeah, it was this period of time where it was like, Dad, can we use the camera? And they're like, sure, you know? And I look back on it and like I do a lot of comedy. I was a sketch comedian. I write a lot of sketch comedy to this day. And yeah, looking back, especially some of the stuff my little brother did, I'm like, this was genuinely funny. Like,
Yeah.
if you had put this on TikTok, it would kill. And it was actually surprising to me how good some of it was. And it's kind of my theory about like, there's something powerful about an audience, and the pressure of an audience causes us to become like a more entertaining version of ourselves. And yeah, that's kind of what you get when you watch those home movies. You kind of get to see the performer in everybody come out.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, you're Irish, so, it's a
Yeah.
storytelling is such a big part of what
Yeah.
you do, but it's
Mhm.
like there's these moments. I say what I do is I teach people like the art of the soliloquy, like Shakespeare. The soliloquy is when you break the fourth wall and you speak straight to the audience, and
Mhm.
you could say pretty much anything you want. And yeah, some people have their soliloquy at church. Some people, their wedding was like the big speech of their life. And yeah, the more I do this, the more I find we actually have all these wonderful little performances that we do for our friends and family that live forever on video. And I'm like, that 15-second version of you is so compelling, you know, and if you put the effort in, you'll always have it.
Yeah, that's right. And in a way, we're sort of all memorializing ourselves as well for future generations. So, that 15 seconds that you get shown to great, 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 great grandchildren or
Yeah,
whoever.
and I can't do sappy goodbyes, Kate. That's my pet
Yeah.
peeve. I can't do sad goodbyes. I hate them.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't, the worst improv show I could ever sit through is when it's the last one a group ever does, because they always have this 10-minute sob session at the end where they all sit there and cry and hug each other and I'm like, you guys are just gonna go across the street to the bar anyway and get drunk.
Yeah.
Let's just skip to that part.
Yeah.
You're not really it's like when people cry at the end of graduation. It's like you're all gonna see each other again anyway. You don't have to get sad about this.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel the same way about video, where it's like a part of you really can kind of live forever,
Yeah.
and that's like a really meaningful thing, because you could choose how you're remembered. You could choose what you want to memorialize. And whenever a celebrity dies, growing up I was a huge comedy fan, so like Chris Farley's death was
Yeah.
devastating to me. And what
Oh,
did I do right when Chris Farley died? I popped on my VHS tape of the best of Chris Farley, and I went and I watched all my favorite sketches again.
mm,
And yeah, I can do that with my family now. Maybe I can't see my grandfather again, but I can have that moment with him. Like, there's my 5th birthday. I'm swinging at a piñata. It's both of my grandfathers sit next to each other. Both of them are gone now. They're both no longer with us, and they're not even saying anything in the video. I mean, they're just sitting there kind of, hanging out amongst themselves, but it's kind of like they're back here in the room a
yeah,
little bit,
that's right.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And on when you were on the Julian Mather show as well, you were talking about how you say goodbye to friends. Like you can't go to the funeral or don't want to go to the funeral. Was that
I go to the funeral, but sometimes I don't even know the person well enough to be invited.
right?
Um, this is what happens when you make a lot of friends online.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like, they just die.
Yeah.
And this is something I think about a lot. This is something, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to pretend to be one, but I have heard some pretty convincing theories as to why sometimes the death of a celebrity or the death of somebody you barely know
Mm,
sometimes will be like, it hurts harder than like the death of a family member,
yeah. Yeah.
and this has happened to me a couple times throughout my life, where it was just somebody, their friend I have online, we're in a group together or something like that, and then one day they're just gone.
Mm,
And yeah, I was talking to Julian about, I have this little tradition where I just spend some time with them, and I say goodbye, and I write them a message saying goodbye. Basically, I go through and um, I can read old conversations with them. Maybe I can see old photographs of us together,
mm,
and yeah, I actually think I like the grieving process way more online, because, like, yeah, oftentimes funerals can be very stiff. If there's a big long line of people standing there, it can be
mm,
kind of awkward to take too long saying
mm.
your goodbyes, but I can take as long as I want if I'm sitting in my home, and um again, it's like, it's such a rare thing to have somebody's attention. It's such a rare thing to be in somebody's thoughts.
Mm,
Being able to just give them my full attention, and then, yeah, I write a message. Usually I preface this because I know people have family members who look after their social media when they die. So I usually preface it by saying, like, hey, this is a message, for Bryn. If anybody's, checking her messages, I'm intending this to be just a goodbye to her.
mm.
Um, but yeah, I'll just kind of tell them what they meant to me, you
Yeah.
know, and yeah, sometimes it's sad because sometimes I'll look through the conversations and I can see that maybe there was some trouble that I missed, and that can be a difficult thing.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, I don't know. Grieving is a process, and oftentimes it's more about coming to terms with ourselves than it is about the person who is deceased.
mm,
But I really like to just take it all in and go through our experiences, think about what they meant to me, and then say goodbye. And I feel like once I've done that, that's what I need to be able to process something like that.
Yeah. And I think, like, I hadn't heard of that before, Chris, actually. It was new to me, and I thought that needs to be shared because, um, you know, I often send my sister messages just on Messenger. She died in 2018, but I've actually always been a bit afraid to say I do that because people say you're not over your grief yet, but it's all part of learning to be without that person as well. It's getting your brain into the idea that they're not there anymore. And I love the idea that you've gone through everything, you know, all your conversations or photographs or things. That's processing your grief. And grief is forever as well. So, you know, you'll always miss your person.
Yeah, and I don't look at it as, so I'm not, I mean, I feel like as a person I'm pretty comfortable with death.
Hmm.
Um, I was raised by a mom who's like, I'm not 60 years young, I'm 60 years old. Like, it
Really?
is fine. She's like, you know what? Getting old is part of life.
Yeah.
You're never gonna beat the Grim Reaper. He's gonna come for you
Yeah.
someday. So like why try to fight that? And it's
Yeah.
like that's how I feel. For me, it's not like I can't let go of this person.
Yeah.
Um, for me, it's more like I as a person, like I do what I do because I understand how sometimes life can feel like screaming into the void.
Yeah.
Um, and especially if somebody died rather tragically, like I've lost some friends to suicide. I've
Mm.
lost some friends to, alcohol and drugs. And um, sometimes a person like that can feel like their life doesn't mean anything.
Mm.
So, um, even even if they don't hear it, even if they're not able to get that message, I don't want that to be true.
Yeah.
And I know it's not true, but um, if I officially state that that person's life meant something to me,
Yeah.
then it did.
Yeah.
That's real,
Mm.
and um, so many of the world's greatest artists, writers, um, the only reason we know about them is because their family violated their wishes to
Yeah.
not destroy all their works after they
Mm.
died. But a lot of our most beloved artists and thinkers died feeling completely alone, like nobody cared and like that their talents were worthless.
Mm.
So I just that's just something I don't want to happen. I feel like I don't know. I mean, we're getting a little deep into the emotions here too, but I remember, we found my grandma's diary,
Oh,
you know, and it was mostly blank,
oh,
you
wow.
know,
Yeah.
and she had some thoughts about this dinner that she didn't cook well enough,
Oh,
and that was
God.
pretty much it. And I'm like, when she did think to put pen to paper, that's what she wrote, you
Yeah.
know. And what a shame, because this was a wonderful woman who raised a family, who was well loved in her community by her church. She was funny, her grandkids loved her. She had all this wonderful things she did for the world,
Yeah.
So it's like I can't control how she felt about herself, but I can control the way she's remembered.
Yeah. Yes. That's right. Yeah. 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 And I think, like, you weren't old enough to tell your grandma that she was amazing, I suppose.
Yeah, it's like,
So,
Grandma, you're fine. Like, I'm sure the roast beef was fine.
yeah.
So it was a little rubbery. Like,
Yeah.
it's better than it would have been if Grandpa had cooked it.
Yeah. That's right.
Like, cut
Yeah.
yourself some slack, lady. Like,
Yeah.
you're
That's
feeding
right.
four kids,
And
you
she
know?
actually, yeah, she actually did it, and they survived. The four kids survived with her
Yeah.
cooking.
But here's the thing, though. It can be difficult to look back on some of that because sometimes people are afraid of what they might see.
Yes.
And again, I was actually, so I have taken a very interesting direction in my life. A couple years ago, I quit my job, I started my own business. I started getting people on camera because I just knew, I saw, I had that experience with sales, and I realized, oh, this is going to be a very important part of the way people do business, and business schools don't teach this yet.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go start teaching it. And one of the reasons that drove me to this was I saw a video of me when I was 10 years old. I got selected to speak to NASA. It was like the first ever link up between students and the International Space Station. We had a big competition. 10 speakers were selected. I was one of them. And it was one of my worst performances. I was
Oh,
scared. I was nervous. I was wooden. The line came out too quickly. I felt bad about it. I felt self-conscious about it. And we had a 20-year reunion a couple years ago. They're like, we're all going to relive the time we talked to NASA. And I watched it and I just cringed because I'm
yeah.
sitting there watching myself as an awkward, scared child, just blowing it.
Yeah.
This big
Oh.
moment that I was supposed to be, I just blew it. And I was like, oh, um, now as an adult, if I had to do that, like, it was a mess. I looked at how it was arranged and like, oh my gosh, who organized this event? It was ham radio. So it was like two guys on a ham radio and they're talking, and like ham radio talk just sounds like nonsense if you don't know
Yeah.
what they're talking about. And there was like no, it was like all the kids were on the stage at the same time and we were wandering around. It was too fast. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if this were me, I would have a little booth or a little set aside area before the next kid is going to go on.
Yeah.
And I would have like a friendly face, like a young mother or something,
Yeah.
being like, hey, let's practice your lines. Let's
Yes.
get you feeling good. You're going to do great. Go out there and do it. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to be that person. I'm going
Yeah.
to be that person. You just need a little bit of encouragement to go out there and do a good job. And once people know they can do a good job, they'll go out there and do it. But yeah, I looked at me as like a scared little kid on camera. And I'm like, oh, why does that still follow me around? Like,
No.
why, when does that go
Yeah.
away? And it does, and it's like, yeah, I can't be the only one who feels this,
Yeah.
but again, it's like, you look at the camera, and again, it's difficult because um sometimes families are awkward, sometimes families are dysfunctional, and like
Mhm.
you're gonna see glimpses of that, and you do have to be prepared if you come from a home where you did not have a great childhood. Yeah, it might be traumatic reliving those, but I actually found, for me, it was the opposite. For
Yeah.
me, I was such a self-critical person. I come from a family where we're very nervous and we obsess over things too much. We worry too much.
Mhm.
And I was not expecting how much smiling, how much love, how much joy I would see
Wow.
watching those videos.
Yeah. Yeah. What a gift though to be able to find all those as well. And you know, give them to future generations and your nieces and brothers, and having
Yeah.
conversations about what you remember, because not everybody remembers it in the same way either.
Or even like, again, I talk about the mysteries of the past, but there's so
Yeah.
many moments where it's like, I don't know when this clip was made, but I see the TV is on in the background
Yeah.
and they're watching the news. And if you close up whenever you're watching the news will show you the date and time. So I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, you can figure out exactly when it is.
Yeah.
And so like, okay, so this had to be June 3rd, 1992. I don't know when this next clip is, but the clip after that is my brother's birthday, which happens at the end of August.
Yeah.
So I'm going to guess that this middle footage is sometime in July of 1992, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And even like watching like my you get all these unexpected glimpses about how the world has changed.
Yeah.
Like even just seeing what Chicago looked like 64 years ago as opposed to today is kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Or it's like, I recognize that street. Looks totally different. Um, but yeah, even like watching, so one of the old tapes is a baseball game. It's the Chicago Cubs And I was like, why do we have this tape? Well, it's because my dad brought my older brother to that baseball game. So my grandpa taped it, hoping that he would catch him in the crowd.
Oh,
Um, so I just have this baseball game from like 1990, and I watched the whole game, and I'm like, there were barely any commercials.
yeah,
It's so wild. I'm like, I just watched a 2.5 hour baseball game. There was only like 4 or 5 commercial breaks, and they were for local businesses that were sponsoring the game.
yeah,
I go, now they're just inundating you with like you see more ads per minute. More often, they're more repetitive. It like eh, you don't even realize how your habits and how your expectations have changed until you go back in time and literally sit through how it used to be.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. It's amazing. Amazing what you can find out. It'd be great to do a side by side, you know, Chicago and now.
Yeah.
That'd
Or
be awesome.
even like with the family members, they'll say like,
Oh, yes.
oh, oh, you look just like your father, you look just like your mother. Sometimes you look exactly like your uncle did when he was 10. And you're like, oh my gosh, I look exactly like Uncle Greg in this shot, or you could see the little, like you go deeper into the ancestry and you're like, oh my gosh, my great aunt looks exactly like my niece does now. And it's like you see those links in the family where it's like, and even like little personality things where it's like, oh my gosh, I do that same thing with my, like it's
Yes.
crazy.
Yeah. Oh, that's so awesome. It's so wonderful seeing history on video, on film, whatever we call it now.
Yeah. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's funnier too. It's funnier than people realize. And it's like, I'm a comedian. I teach comedy sometimes too. I learned comedy at Chicago's Second City, which is the theater where like half of Saturday Night Live came from.
Oh, yeah.
And, they teach you to build characters based on reality. You know, one
Yeah.
exercise they do, like people don't realize that a lot of the characters on Saturday Night Live that are like most famous are just like someone doing an impression of their dad, you
Yes.
know.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what I teach people is like the version of you that's not trying to be funny is actually the version of you that's funny. And like one of the funniest things that I saw, it just kills me every time I watch it, is like the camera's brand new. The year is 1959. My grandpa's going around Christmas time. It's all these relatives packed into this small room. He's shining the camera on everybody, and the light is so bright. It's got this really bright light. So he shines it on them, and just like everybody's sitting there, like, oh, oh, and they start shielding, and there's no audio, but it's like and like all the women are just like, they all look like they're like movie stars. They've all got their hair and their makeup done perfectly, and they're having their elegant conversations, and then they're just like, oh, and like, and it's like Christmas morning, the kids coming downstairs and the camera shines, and they're just like, oh, dad. It's just like, it's so funny. It's so funny,
Oh, God.
I'm just cracking up while I'm like, he goes and he blinds every single person in the room,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's like you can't plan for something like that. And it's like they had no idea. They shot it and probably forgot about it. They didn't realize that 64 years from now, my LinkedIn followers and I are going to be laughing at it,
Yeah, that's right.
Like life's just funny that way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, Chris, I have had you for a long time. It's been amazing speaking with you. I could speak with you forever.
Thank
But we
you. I
sort
could
of
be
have
here
to,
forever.
yeah, we sort of have to wrap it up. Is there anything you want to close on or say?
Yeah, if anybody at home wants to follow me, my name is Chris Bogue. So you can find me on LinkedIn, you can find me on YouTube, you can find me on TikTok at Chris Sells His Soul. Go ahead and you can connect with me, or you can check me out at ChristopherBogue.com. And yeah, I would say if you are interested in digitizing your home movies, there's a lot of different services you can use. You can send them away in any format and have someone do them for you for a few hundred or thousands of dollars. But if you've got a box of VHS tapes or a box of tapes or something like that somewhere, there are hookups you can buy where it's just hooks right into your computer and you can just digitize them yourself. So if you've ever thought about doing it, I say do it. I'm very glad I spent the time to do this. Yeah, it's not like those tapes are increasing in video quality. Get them now before they get even worse.
Yeah, that's right. That's so important. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for being here. It's just been a delight talking with you.
Thanks for having me, Kate.
Okay, bye.